Всем добро пожаловать на программу GitHub Universe 2020 «Лучшее». Я Женя, директор программы по конфиденциальности или Privacy Program Manager. И вместе с моими замечательными ведущими мы проведем вас через основные события нашего ежегодного мероприятия GitHub Universe Вселенная. GitHub.
Все верно, всем привет. Меня зовут Юра, я инженер по разработке ПО, NPM и GitHub. Круто быть здесь с вами сегодня. С нами сегодня Иван, который будет модерировать сессию Q&A, которую мы проведем в Teams после окончания стриминга. Там вы сможете пообщаться с нами и задать интересующие вопросы, а также рассказать о своих идеях на предмет того, что еще интересного вы бы хотели узнать о нашем мероприятии «Планеты GitHub». Ссылка на встречу в Teams будет опубликована в конце мероприятия, а также в чате на YouTube. Иван, немножко расскажи о себе.
Всем привет, я Иван, я студент Санкт-Петербургского политехнического университета, и в этом году, примерно в сентябре, я стал амбассадором программы GitHub Campus Experts в России.
Ну что ж, GitHub Universe 2020 стало лучшим и крупнейшим мероприятием Universe за всю историю проведения. 3 дня информационного материала, всего более 60 часов, это очень много. У нас были диджеи, сессии вопросов и ответов, тезисы, панельные дискуссии и лекции от самых выдающихся спикеров. Мы хотим, чтобы шоу понравилось каждому, поэтому мы отобрали наши любимые моменты Universe и объединили их в программе «Лучшее». В течение следующего часа, более или менее, вы увидите основные моменты из более десятка сессий. У нас так много классного материала, что даже было трудно выработать, что именно показать вам сегодня. Но не стоит волноваться. Каждая из сессий размещена в сети и доступна для просмотра. Просто зайдите на сайт githubuniverse.com, мы это тоже выставим на экране, и нажмите на раздел «Дополнительно» в меню. Там вы сможете увидеть каждую секунду Universe 2020 в любое удобное время для вас. Но вернемся к сегодняшней программе. Мы начинаем наши лучшие моменты с самого начала мероприятия, со слова нашего генерального директора Нета Фридмана, в котором вы узнаете о куче новых функций в нашем продукте. Мы услышим несколько слов о DevOps и о безопасности. Вам наверняка будет интересны эти темы независимо от вашей роли в команде. Затем мы посмотрим состояние актов Вселенной, нашего ежегодного исследования тенденций и анализа использования GitHub, а также деятельности сообщества разработчиков открытого исходного кода. Закончим мы презентациями 3 организаций, которые расскажут об использовании GitHub для решения своих уникальных задач. Что ж, начнем. Universe 2020 началось с феноменального объявления от Нета. Он представил решение GitHub Enterprise Server 3.0 и рассказал о невероятных новых функциях, которые доступны вам уже сейчас. Github Discussions, Codespaces, мобильные приложения и многое другое. Let's go.
Good morning. Welcome to GitHub Universe. Today, we are going to walk you through how we use GitHub at GitHub, and along the way, show you some of the really cool new features we've been building. Let's check it out. I start my morning with the GitHub Mobile App. I check out my notifications, and I catch up with my favorite communities. GitHub Discussions makes this so easy. We announced it a few months ago as a great place for Q&A and open-ended conversations, and today we're announcing that every open source community can try GitHub Discussions with our new public beta. Just head to your repo settings and turn it on right now. We've learned a ton from the communities that have already been using Discussions, and we've added some great new features like customizable categories and native support in our mobile apps. It's awesome.
With GitHub Mobile, not only do I get push notifications for things like comments, but I can keep working on any of my repositories no matter where I am. Let's jump to Nea's pull request and take a look. With UI changes like this, sometimes it's hard to know if everything's working just by looking at the diff. Sometimes I actually need to run the app to see the changes. This calls for a Codespace. GitHub Codespaces gives me a complete dev environment right in my browser, even on an iPad. It's like an infinite dev box configured in code, just how you need it. And since Codespaces is built on top of Visual Studio Code, it gives us a fully featured editor right in my browser, complete with built-in terminal access and shell access.
Tens of millions of developers use GitHub, but so do hundreds of thousands of companies, including some of the biggest in the world. For those users, we've been hard at work adding all the new features you saw today to GitHub Enterprise Server, so you get all the power of the best teams in the world running on your company's network. That includes GitHub Actions, packages, code scanning, and support for the native GitHub mobile apps. All of this is available in a major new release we call GitHub Enterprise Server 3.0. This is the biggest release we've done of GitHub Enterprise Server in years.
Ну что, привет вновь. Я надеюсь, что связь улучшится, потому что я переключился на другого провайдера. Итак, мы посмотрели, что у нас появился GitHub Enterprise Server 3.0, и это наш крупнейший релиз за последние годы. Обновлены мобильные приложения, и теперь можно ревьюить PR прямо с телефона. Стала доступна бета-версия Discussions. Их вы можете включить в настройках репозитория уже сейчас. Растет и развивается экосистема GitHub Actions. Вы можете включить сканирование кода на предмет секретов. И, наконец, появились Codespaces, которые позволяют программировать на любом устройстве, например, на iPad. Если же говорить о новых фичах, то на Universe 2020 их было представлено великое множество. Мы не просто рассказали о них, но и показали, как компании могут использовать их наиболее эффективно. Возьмем, к примеру, следующее выступление Майи Росс, директора по продукту в GitHub. Майя показала, какие новые возможности Enterprise Server 3.0 дает администраторам в отношении программирования, автоматизации, безопасности и планирования, чтобы ускорить цикл разработки ПО.
So myself and my colleagues spend a lot of time talking to administrators, people like Keith, who run DevOps tooling for their companies. And we know that you've got a lot to do, and it's pretty hard sometimes. You have to secure all your software and your applications across the supply chain. You need to help your teams to automate workflows so they can focus on what they do best. You need to try and build a culture of collaboration, virtual teams, communities of practice to help swarm around new ideas and products that you want to launch. And of course, you need to make sure that all of the tools you're responsible for are available, secure, and governed. At GitHub, we have one underlying philosophy for how we help companies, big and small, to achieve goals like these. And that is to empower developers with an integrated platform. And in this talk, I'm going to talk to you about how you can use some of the capabilities in GitHub Enterprise to achieve goals like that. But first of all, what are those capabilities? So those capabilities sit across 4 core pillars: coding, automation, security, and planning. And all of those sit on our kind of secure enterprise foundation that allows administrators to secure your code and access to it and to govern it through policies. It also enables you to build a community and crucially tap into the power of that github.com community. And I'm extremely pleased to say that all of these capabilities are now coming to Enterprise Server, to our thousands of customers running GitHub Enterprise in their own environments. Our Enterprise Server includes GitHub Actions, packages, advanced security code scanning and secret scanning, and also comes with support for our iOS and Android apps. As I mentioned, one of the big things that we've been working on this year is to add Git events to the Enterprise Cloud audit log, and I'm just going to show you briefly how that works. So first of all, many of our customers like to query the audit log through the API. And we can do that here. Just a quick example. Here, just querying only Git events from my enterprise, and you can see it's bringing up Git fetch events, Git clone, and Git push events from across the enterprise. I can query both Git and GitHub events at the same time if you want to, or just one or the other. You can also export those Git events just here and your GitHub events. Next year, we'll be adding those Git events to this UI as well. Just want to touch briefly on some branch protection rules and how we're extending them. You might have seen a little bit of this in the keynote if you managed to watch it. So here I have a couple of branch protection rules set up, which means that any code changes need to be reviewed, first of all, by a third party, and then by my code owners, normally often a security or expert team, before they're merged in. GitHub has also recently expanded the same concept to environment protection rules. So if you're using GitHub Actions for your CI/CD flows, you can put in checks on environment deployments. Just have a quick look at that. Here I have another repo. It's set up with these environments, and my production environment has a environment protection rule, again saying that I need to have a couple of reviewers. Jump over to Actions. We can see a pull request that has been merged in and then deployed through my environments. And as per my rule, it has been approved by me. This is one of the biggest things that we've shipped in the last few months. And in this vein, we're now announcing a new change to how we release Enterprise Server. So from Enterprise Server 3.0, we will start every feature release with a release candidate build. That's a build that's gone through full GitHub testing, but one that we're putting out there for you to pick up, test, try, bash around, and give us feedback on. And when we're happy based on your feedback that it is a very stable release, we'll GA it. I think this is going to make a big difference to the overall reliability of the product, and I'm excited for this change. So GitHub has really built the community standard for automation with GitHub Actions. I'm sure you will have seen this before, but Actions is the #1 CI tool on github.com, and it's achieved that status in just a year after launching. And we now have 6,000 actions on the marketplace, which I just think is an amazing testament to how easy it is for developers to build actions. Now, our security capabilities have grown massively over the last year. Advanced Security offers both code scanning and secret scanning, which are automated security scanning tools. And in addition to that, our dependency alerts, automated security fixes, and the advisory database are making sure that both private and open source repos are staying secure.
Отличная презентация от Майи. Я с ней регулярно работаю над другими проектами, над этим тоже. Так что, наконец-то вы можете делиться вашим кодом, удобно упакованным в пакет, прямо в GitHub Enterprise с помощью Actions, ведущим среди решений непрерывной интеграции на github.com. К тому же сканирование кода и конфиденциальной информации или секретов теперь тоже доступно на GitHub Enterprise. Моя любимая новинка – это мобильное приложение для iOS и Android. Нет ничего лучше, чем одобрять PR из любого места. А самое главное, это что теперь есть предвыпускные сборки этого продукта.
Так, Женя сейчас к нам переподключится, но она говорила о предвыпускных версиях сборок, которые зависят от того фидбэка, который вы даете во время выполнения разных actions в течение workflow. Итак, что касается презентации среды Codespaces, она вызвала очень сильную реакцию, когда Нет упоминал их в своем выступлении. Подумайте, сколько времени наши разработчики проводят в своей среде программирования. Сколько времени новые разработчики тратят для того, чтобы установить среду разработки с нуля. Так вот, с помощью Codespaces разработчики и компании могут перейти от репозитория к работающему пространству кода в считанные секунды, без установки и конфигурирования. Будем двигаться дальше. Следующий по программе шел обзор среды Codespaces от Брекли Брукс и Мэтью Изабелл из GitHub. Из их выступлений вы узнаете, что такое Codespaces, как эта среда может помочь вашей команде ускорить создание кода, а также увидеть демонстрацию Codespaces в действии. Let's go.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bailey. I'm here with Matthew, and we're both product managers on GitHub Codespaces. Earlier this year, we announced GitHub Codespaces at Satellite, and the excitement from the community was overwhelming, to say the least. It was amazing just how excited the community was to be able to have a cloud dev environment, so you can go from a repo on github.com to a running Codespace within seconds without any setup or configuration. GitHub Codespaces are instant cloud developer environments. Codespaces provide you with a machine you can access through a browser or your IDE, where you can write, run, debug, test, commit, and push your code from, which leads us to an important question. Why should anyone care? There's a lot of hardware out there. You're watching this on a machine that you can potentially write code on. So what is so special about Codespaces? The goal for most of us is to write great code that ships value to our customers, the open source community, ourselves, whoever that audience is. The goal is not to spend your time doing local dev environment management, although it can consume a lot of your time and it may not be your job. Your company might have a person or a team where this is such a problem that it's become their job. And hopefully you're not managing Python 2.7 anymore that's been end of life. But it's just an example to say, let's write great code and be able to write it fast. Writing great code should be about doing just that, and not the periphery of machine management that surrounds it.
The way we get to Codespaces is right from this page. We can go to the code button, and right inside this dropdown, we can open this project inside of a Codespace. So let's go ahead and do that and talk about what's happening and what that offers us for this project. So I've created this Codespace. I was using it pretty recently, and I'm going to jump in and just resume an existing Codespace. So you'll see we connect here, and we land in what feels and really is VS Code, and it's VS Code in the browser. And for me personally, this feels a lot like home. And the reason is because I use the GitHub Dark theme, and this is using the GitHub Dark theme. But if I had another theme, I could have that set up and synced across my Codespaces as well. You can see I have my custom bash prompt here, and my dot files are synced over automatically. So I really have everything that makes this feel like I'm developing locally. You'll even see there are some extensions that aren't standard here, that don't come automatically out of the box. So I'm also able to bring in the extensions that I'm used to, that I like to work with, and use them all inside of the browser for this Codespace. I have an editor. I have an editor in the cloud. It is VS Code, but it's not just an editor, right? It's a full cloud developer environment. So what that means is we can go to the terminal here, and we can go ahead and run our app. And you'll see our app ran. It says it's running on localhost 3000. And you'll see I got this toast that says my service is running on port 3000 and it's available. So let's go ahead and open this in the browser. So what's going to happen here is we're going to connect to a forwarded port from this Codespace, and it's going to load our app. So you'll see I have this app called Haikus for Mona, and we have some of those octocats that Martin was just talking about. And I have little haikus that we've written about some of these octocats. And this is really cool. I'm running a Node app. It has a Postgres database backing it. It's not super complex, but I'm able to get the full app running with a container for my web service and with a container for my database. And I can interact with it. I can do everything I would do to build this app locally, and that port is just forwarded on securely to me. But we also, again, have VS Code here. So we can do more than just run our app. We can debug our app. So let's go ahead and run this app with our debugger attached. So you'll see we have the app, our port 3000 is forwarded again. And what we're going to do here is let's just set a breakpoint. So I'm going to create a little bit more space here. And as I said, this is a pretty basic Node Express app. And we have some endpoints that are defined here. And we have this endpoint for the heart experience. So I can go ahead and heart something and like it, and the counter goes up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint right here. And we can jump right back into our code or our live running app. I'm going to go ahead and click this heart button. And you'll see up here, we hit our breakpoint. So we can jump over here. We can actually look at the stack. We can look at the request that came in here. We can step through this function. This is super powerful. I'm able to, run a full debugger of my app in the browser. But I also like to spend a lot of my time using VS Code locally. And I want to go from VS Code and connect to my Codespace. And I can do just that. So let's go to VS Code. And I'm actually going to go to the Remote Explorer. And I've installed the Codespaces extension. And what I'm able to do from here is I can connect to this Codespace from VS Code. So what's going to happen here is this is going to take a second. It's going to set up our connection. And then we're going to have our entire Codespace in just the state that it was, right? Because we're connected to that remote machine. So you can see my changes are here. And I can go ahead and if we want to make our commits from here, updates for live demo, can go ahead and make our changes. Everything looks good. And let's go ahead and push them. So I'm going to go ahead and push. And now our changes are back on our repo. So if I go back to the web, we can see this full end-to-end. I'm going to use the command line with this nifty little trick to go back to the repo. And you'll see updates for live demo. Here's our commit. You'll see that it kicked off GitHub Actions. So it's now running my tests. And we did all of this from the Codespace.
Всем привет! У меня теперь была моя очередь делить интернет-проблемы. Кажется, мой интернет еще не проснулся. У меня 8 часов утра в городе Сиэтл. Так про видео. Наша цель – создание прекрасного кода быстро. Никто не хочет возиться с содержанием местной среды разработки, и вы получаете возможность писать код на любом рабочем компьютере, даже на планшете, прямо сейчас. Запускайте VS Code с вашими любимыми расширениями прямо в браузере. Enterprise Server 3.0 призвана помочь разработчикам писать отличный код, упрощая при этом рабочие процессы и используя свои любимые инструменты. Одним из путей достижения этой цели является интеграция DevOps, а также CD, Continuous Delivery или непрерывное непрерывное развертывание с помощью GitHub Actions. Нет уже об этом немного рассказывал в своем выступлении. Углубляясь далее в тему, посмотрим основные моменты выступления Криса Паттерсона в сессии «Непрерывное развертывание ПО с помощью GitHub Actions». Вы увидите, что GitHub Actions сейчас стал ведущим инструментом среди всех решений непрерывной интеграции на github.com и узнаете, как использовать Actions для защиты и мониторинга вашей среды. Let's go.
GitHub Actions is grown massively. Right now, we run about 75 million jobs. The slide says 73, but when I looked this morning, it's about 75 million different jobs a month across a wide variety of workloads. CI is probably the most common thing that people absolutely automate. But the amazing growth has really come, I think, due to the community. And if we look across sort of all of the different CIs that happen on GitHub, we definitely believe Actions is by far the number one. We seem to do the most, at least from what we can see. We actually see closer to 10,000 different actions used across different organizations. And we think that's pretty incredible because that means people are both using the community, but also taking advantage of using actions within their own organizations. What we implemented was protected environments. And the idea here is we wanted to prevent unauthorized deployments. And in order to think about how that might work with GitHub Actions, in fact, you've seen this on the roadmap. If you looked at our public roadmap, we have something called manual approvals. So this is configured on your repo settings outside of the workflow. And when you try to deploy to a given environment, if a set of reviewers is required, the system will pause that job before it ever goes to a runner. and send out a series of notifications and require a person in this list or somebody in a team to come and say it's okay for that job to continue to deploy to that environment. We heard from a lot of people that they want to be able to track what is currently in a particular environment, whether that environment is production or if that environment is a staging or whatever. Starting to build this new activity log here is part of our goal to really move in that direction. And this is kind of where this kind of 4-ish new capabilities comes in, because this deployments view actually exists in GitHub today. It just isn't very commonly used because it's a little bit hard to make it show up. And so we took some of the existing platform in GitHub and integrated directly into Actions to make it easy for you to get this list of deployments. We wanted to give you a much better way to visually track how your workflows are progressing. As you have these more complex workflows, particularly ones that do sort of pipeline style deployments to different environments, or maybe have rich matrices or other concepts, having the ability to see where those go and sort of track their progress at this very visual level, we think improves just the overall usability of Actions, the usability of more complex workflows, and the ability to debug potential issues. And we've also started to do some other work to integrate in other places. I think you saw in the keynote, Nat had a really neat little vignette at the end where he launched dark mode, and you saw sort of a sneak preview of some work we're doing with the mobile app. We've also done a lot of work with the team who works on the Slack integration to integrate those there, and you'll start to see these roll out again. And we think that as we use all of these endpoints for GitHub, we can really help drive that culture of rapid deployment and unblocking your team from where you are exactly how you need to. We think that all those things together really do add up to the ability to do very, very rich continuous delivery workflows with GitHub Actions. We have a lot of plans to enhance this capability in the future. For example, the protection rules for environments, we really see that as a great potential point for integration.
Еще одна классная сессия про GitHub Actions. Отвечу основные моменты. Нам показали интегрированные логи активности, которые дают полный контроль и возможность аудита. Добавлен визуальный контроль выполнения сложных workflows, а также интеграция со Slack. Вы только что увидели, как GitHub Actions используется для непрерывной интеграции и непрерывного развертывания. Теперь давайте посмотрим, как еще можно использовать Actions. Следующий пример нам продемонстрирует специалист по поддержке штатных разработчиков GitHub Брайан Дуглас, или Бедуги. Это у него хендл такой на GitHub, как его здесь называют. Бедуги был соведущим канала для разработчиков на YouTube, на Universe 2020. Если вы пропустили его совместное выступление с Кет Корович, имейте в виду, что там было очень много всего интересного. Он покажет, как с помощью Actions автоматизирует работу с Lighthouse. Let's watch that.
I think what a lot of people kind of think of GitHub Actions as is CI. And I even saw this in Twitter, hashtag GitHub Universe. Check out the Twitter feed there. Someone brought up with the continuous delivery features, like what does that mean for continuous integration? I think they're sort of conflating everything into one, which is fine because that's what GitHub Actions is. And if you zoom back a bit, it's all about workflow automation, automating yourself to get back to the code. And I bring this up because when Jason Warner stood on stage a couple years ago at GitHub Universe, he presented Actions as a feature for developers to get back to what they want to do. So if you're constantly doing all this tedious checking in, like hitting up Slack, telling your coworkers to review your PRs, like you could automate all that stuff. And the beauty of this is that GitHub Actions basically gets you back to what you want to do, which is write code. One other thing that I also added to in my workflow is adding Lighthouse. Now, Jake Jarvis he has this Lighthouse action, and the one thing that I do for my deployments is I deploy it to Netlify. And the reason why I chose this is that every time there's a Netlify deploy preview on my project, which is open source, I actually get an entire preview directly linked inside of my pull request, which is beautiful because I've been using this other action I built called Logify, which also brings my previews into the deployment logs first and foremost. I don't have an example about this in CD yet because it just launched yesterday. But what I like about this is that I get Lighthouse scores every time I open a PR. So if I have a PR from someone else, because this is an open source project, anybody else in the community, I actually can find out if I have like a degradation of my Lighthouse score or performance or accessibility right there in line with the PR. And when I talk about sort of identifying repetitive tasks, every time I open up a pull request, I want to make sure accessibility and performance do not go down. I want them to stay consistent or get better. So I bring that up because with the Lighthouse action, I can actually embed those Lighthouse scores within my action logs. So that way, not only in my action logs, but also in the PR comments. And it's all powered from this one action, which is beautiful. And like, you're probably thinking, you know, Lighthouse is already embedded in Chrome. Like you can just open up the Chrome tab and like just know what you're doing and check that before you merge the PR. And the thing is, I won't do that. I won't do that for anybody's PRs. I want this to be automated and get myself back to writing my own code and not have to do that for every time a PR is open up on my project. So I bring this up. Shout out to the artifacts too as well, like actually having the report in line inside of my logs as well. It's just a beautiful experience.
Итак, прежде чем продолжим, я хочу сказать, что мы видим ваши вопросы в чате на YouTube, и мы обязательно ответим на них во время созвона Q&A в Teams, который будет после стриминга. А пока продолжим. И то, что мы сейчас увидели, это замечательный пример того, как с помощью Actions мы улучшили рабочий процесс, в котором отсутствовала непрерывная интеграция. Actions помогает разработчикам вернуться к тому, чем они, то есть мы, на самом деле хотим заниматься, то есть писать код. При этом происходит интеграция с инструментами, которыми уже разработчики пользуются. Множество крутых Actions уже доступны в магазине GitHub. Продолжим тему новых фич обзором Github Discussions, которые перешли в публичную бету. Сейчас мы посмотрим выступление Неи Батра. Она является директором по разработке ПО в GitHub. Неа представила на Universe замечательную демонстрацию настройки, использования и модерирования Discussions. Let's see it.
I'm really excited about talking about building your community with GitHub Discussions, which as of Tuesday is available for all repos in public beta. And so thousands of you have turned it on since then. I want to quickly talk about the open source ecosystem and why GitHub Discussions exists in the first place. So this is an incredibly oversimplified cycle of what open source work looks like on GitHub. So basically people use a feature, tool, or product, then they notice an issue, they file an issue, and that work will hopefully get prioritized, maybe worked on. Someone will open up a pull request, it'll get merged, and boom, it's slated for a new release and it goes out into the world and people use the new thing. So already there's something missing, and that is where the conversation lives. And that's because it usually lives over here. Outside of the cycle, products ignite ideas and facilitate conversations, and that conversation ends up in chat applications, forums, social news, and basically sometimes GitHub issues. We want to keep Q&A and conversations separate from GitHub issues, but we also don't want those to be completely detached either. Their relationship is important. So you can think of GitHub Discussions as the living room of your open source community. If you haven't enabled discussions yet, I'm going to show you how now. So to start, you're going to want to go to your repos settings page, and then you can go on that default page, scroll down to the features section, and you'll see a discussions checkbox waiting for you. And it looks like this. So you can click on set up discussions to get started, and this is going to take you to a pre-made template that we've set up for you. Click on pin discussion, and there you have it on your index page, your first discussion. Now, if you have issues that should be discussions, you can cover those individually, convert them or in bulk. So if you wanted to do it in bulk, you can go here to the label section. Here we selected the question label. Obviously, probably the best one for that is a Q&A category. And there you go. All you have to do is click that button, and you're going to convert those from your issues over to your discussions. And you can see that over on your discussions page. Every repository comes with a default set of 4 categories: general, ideas, Q&A, and show and tell. But these can be modified. I think the most important thing about categories is that you get to set the tone here to help the community know what to expect and where to go. Let's get directly into the mechanics of marking an answer. So anyone with Triage Plus access or the author can do this. And this is kind of what it looks like. When you find an answer to a question, you can click on the checkbox and a great box will appear and you can say who marked the answer, and it'll be recorded so you can even see who marked it right underneath. Now we have all the tools that we need to manage existing discussions. Let's talk really briefly about some enhancements we have to improve the community's interactions. And first things first, you can see right here, there's a leaderboard on the right-hand side and it shows people with the most answered discussions. Finally, I wanted to briefly talk to you about what you can do with triager, write, maintainer, and admin permissions. And as far as discussions go, people with write, maintain, admin access can basically do the same thing with two exceptions. So people with maintain and admin access can enable discussions altogether from the settings page. And also they're the only ones who can create and edit categories, but otherwise they have the same permissions. And that's basically it. That's what you have. So we talked about getting started, categories, new discussions, marking answers, how you can use the information on the site to provide recognition, and how to moderate and keep the community healthy. So here's an example here where Snowpack has used a pin discussion as their change log. And so it's kind of pinned at the top. You can see that Fred's got some spot on GIFs here. And what I love is that each comment is a new version and it details, and it allows people to easily reply with thoughts or words of thank or encouragement.
Как бы вы назвали discussions по-русски? Дискуссии или обсуждения? В любом случае, discussions доступны для всех репозиториев в публичной бета-версии. Обычно общение с коллегами происходит вне цикла разработки open source, но теперь с помощью discussions обсуждения можно встроить в этот процесс. До сих пор мы узнавали про новые функции GitHub и о том, как они работают для организаций, использующих github.com или организаций, которые развернули у себя среду GitHub Enterprise. Теперь перейдем к теме безопасности, важнейшей вне зависимости от того, поддерживаете ли вы проект самостоятельно или им занимается большая IT-компания. Для начала посмотрим основные моменты выступления нашего второго ключевого спикера, операционного директора GitHub Эрика Бреша. Эрика продемонстрирует познавательные статистические данные о безопасности и о том, как GitHub помогает защитить информацию на производстве и повысить скорость разработки. Let's watch Erika.
GitHub is where the world builds software. Over 50 million developers trust GitHub to collaborate, test, build, and deploy code, including over 70% of the Fortune 50. In fact, in the last year, over 60 million new repos were added and over 1.9 billion contributions were made. Those are some seriously big numbers. The stability and resilience of our global platform is critical to providing developers with a platform they can count on. GitHub Enterprise is built on the same principles as GitHub.com, and as a result, benefits from the years we've spent optimizing the platform to be trusted, reliable, and resilient. From day one, we've focused on building great products and experiences for the developers who spend their days or their nights on GitHub. From pull requests to Codespaces, actions to CodeQL, and everything in between, our vision is to build the home for all developers, whether they're working on a fun side project or building mission-critical software for Fortune 500. Across all open source repositories, repos that use actions on pull requests see PRs merge 1.2 times faster, and the number of merged PRs increased by 1.3x. That's 34% more pull requests merged. This is huge in terms of improving developer velocity.
Итак, то есть благодаря этому вы получаете доступ к сообществу исследователей в области безопасности GitHub. Интересно, что около 70% компаний из списка Fortune 50 доверяют защиту своей безопасности GitHub. Также благодаря безопасному CI, как уже Эрика упомянула, можно мержить пиары быстрее и в большем количестве. Эрика также упомянула о некоторых наших фичах для обеспечения безопасности, включая CodeQL. Вскоре мы узнаем чуть побольше об этом. А пока давайте послушаем Сашу Розенбаум, старшего менеджера по продукту в GitHub. Ее сессия на Universe была посвящена попаданию в коммиты конфиденциальной информации, например, credentials. Если вы подключались к Universe, то могли видеть, как Бедуги рассказывал историю о том, как он получил счет на $37 000 от AWS за то, что разместил конфиденциальную информацию в коммите. Из следующего выступления вы узнаете, как GitHub интегрирует функции обеспечения безопасности в интерфейс для разработчика, чтобы избежать таких дорогостоящих ошибок, как у бидуги. Let's see that.
We're going to talk about the state of security today. So my favorite analogy for this is imagine that you just built your most amazing favorite mansion and you have just installed all the most expensive furniture and all the most expensive appliances, and you just forgot to install doors. So this is sort of how we treat security today. We just kind of say, okay, we have time for this. We're just going to first deliver on all of the features, and then we're going to basically add some locks on the doors and some doors to our mansion, right? Because features is what's important. If we look at the chart of how we deliver code, then we actually see that the more lines of code we write, the more security threats we actually introduce. And so we don't learn from our mistakes. We just basically continue committing bugs and moving on and just like committing secrets, committing security vulnerabilities into our main code base. And despite that, as developers, we often treat it this way. So we just basically say, okay, it works in dev, so it's a security problem now, right? So I have developed my code, I committed all my stuff, and now I can just get and ship it to security, and then security is going to fix it all for me. But we know that that's not possible because there's so many more developers than security professionals. Basically, we have about 45 million estimated developers and only 70,000 estimated security researchers in the world. So today, I'm going to basically talk about how GitHub can help you fix your security issues for you. So we have a large number of features in GitHub Advanced Security that can help you integrate security into your developer experience. So it's not extraneous to what you do, but rather it's shifted all the way left and integrated into your development lifecycle. So basically, we help you secure multiple parts of your code. So we help you secure the supply chain, the code, the development lifecycle, and of course, your platform. But today, I'm going to talk specifically about the code part. So we can see that almost 50% of all the breaches in the world actually include stolen credentials. And yet we're pretty bad about not committing these credentials or these secrets into source control repositories. And this is where secret scanning actually comes in. So we have different different oriented features for public and private repos. So I'm going to start with public repos. For public repos, we actually have secret scanning for a number of years already, and we are doing it at massive scale. We're scanning about 150 million pushes a week. So basically every push into a public repo basically gets scanned by GitHub to identify secrets. And many people don't know that it's happening because it's transparent to you. If you as a user check in your code and that code actually contains a secret, so we actually run different regular expressions from known secret scanning partners to identify if something you committed actually matches one of these secrets. So basically, we then send the matches to a partner verify endpoint, and then the partner can verify if it's a real secret or if it's not. And then depending on what the partner wants to do with this, sometimes they revoke the secret, and sometimes they also email the user, right? So basically, we have this process in which completely transparent to the user in some cases, your secret actually gets revoked by the partner, and so your secret is no longer in the repository. So if you say committed an AWS secret into your repository, then instead of someone stealing your credentials, we're actually probably going to revoke it for you.
Что же мы узнали от Саши? Больше кода значит больше угроз безопасности. Но теперь сканирование конфиденциальной информации ваших секретов доступно и в публичных, и в частных репозиториях. Теперь давайте посмотрим, как функции обеспечения безопасности, которые упоминала Эрика в своем выступлении, речь пойдет о CodeQL. На Universe 2020 год Бас Ван Шайк и Завье Рене Корай позволили нам заглянуть под капот CodeQL и посмотреть, как это работает. После того они рассказали о программе поощрения Bounty, которые пользуются GitHub и по которой пользователи могут помогать устранять уязвимости в коде, в открытом коде и в своем тоже. Let's watch about CodeQL.
So, GitHub code scanning. Earlier this year, we announced it, and code scanning does exactly what it says on the tin. It scans your code for security vulnerabilities. And any alerts we find in pull requests are automatically flagged up to you so that you can fix them before you merge the code changes into your main branch. That particular code patterns could be, for example, a server-side template injection vulnerability. When you run CodeQL, whether that's in code scanning or on your own local machine, the first thing it will do is it extracts all of the source code that you have into a special relational database. In a way, it's similar to a MySQL or a Postgres database. It's a very special one, though, a special purpose-built read-only one. We call it a CodeQL database. And just like with MySQL and with Postgres, you can run queries against that database. And in fact, a CodeQL query looks a bit like a SQL query, but it's a lot more powerful. I'll show you one in the live demo that I've got. Now, a CodeQL query is a way to sort of interrogate and explore your source code. A very simple query might, for example, look for a variable called password that you then write to a plain text log file. More advanced security analysis, more advanced queries do very intricate flow analysis. They track where user-controlled data enters your application. They track it through your application, through function calls and data structures, to a location where it might be used in an unsafe way. And the SSTI analysis does exactly that. It tracks untrusted user data that eventually ends up in a template. Now, in a way, every query captures the security knowledge of a security researcher. And by codifying that knowledge, that we can apply it at a massive scale. So, for example, we run CodeQL against hundreds of thousands of repositories, and every single query result that we get is an alert in code scanning.
То есть мы посмотрели про CodeQL, и база данных CodeQL – это, собственно, ваш код, обернутый в виде реляционной базы данных. Это позволяет выполнять запросы для поиска уязвимостей, запросы на языке CodeQL для поиска по базе. Также вы можете масштабировать эти запросы или встраивать их в CI, или делиться этими запросами с сообществом, потому что это просто код. Интересный факт, что по программе поощрения пользователей за нахождение уязвимостей в GitHub уже выплатил более $100 тысяч. Мы перейдем к следующей теме. Мы заметили в GitHub очень интересную особенность, общую для всех компаний. Они всегда представляют себе безопасность как фичу, которая, то есть не так уж необходима на самых ранних этапах разработки. То есть это вообще даже не воспринимается как фича. Поэтому мы пригласили Кита Худлета, старшего менеджера службы совместимости приложений из Thermo Fisher Scientific, чтобы обсудить важность интегрирования функций обеспечения безопасности на ранних стадиях проекта. Он объяснил, почему компании не рассматривают безопасность в качестве фичи, и рассказал, как включить обеспечение безопасности в ваш комплекс инструментов разработки. Let's see that.
We're going to be going through a few different ideas in this concept in terms of why companies might not think of security as a feature, of course, what they do think of as a feature first, and then going into what happens when they don't. But also, of course, some of the good things that can come from thinking of security like a feature, going ahead and then how you can implement that within your tool chain or your process, some further learning, and we'll take it from there. So let's go ahead and dive right in. what makes something a feature, right? That's something that is often discussed in concerning the project management or product management team, the dev teams. They always say, well, that's not really a feature. Security is not a feature. And that's because, of course, features are things that customers ask you for, right? They're the things that people want to see, the things that people will complain about if they don't have it in your application, and so therefore they'll tell you about it. Then, of course, there's resources in terms of people, time, or money. Those are things that get allocated to features. Whatever you're allocating your people, your money, and your time to, those are the features you're working on, whether you're calling them a feature or not. And then features, well, generally speaking, if you build it, you're going to make sure that it's regularly tested. You're going to make sure that it works the way that you want it to, and you're going to make sure that it continues to get enhanced over time. Generally speaking, you're not going to take a feature out unless, of course, it's just really not used, or it's so totally broken that it's not worth continuing and working on. But otherwise, you're going to make that thing better. Those are the features that your company is investing in. So why isn't security considered a feature? And this is kind of an interesting topic because one of the things that I'll often ask dev teams after they've done some security review of their applications is I'll say, do you have a banking app on your phone? Now, that doesn't always translate depending on where you are in the world. Some cash-heavy cultures don't really use banking applications, might do e-commerce, but I'll ask a dev, are you using some sort of financial transaction application on your phone? And the answer is almost universally yes. Well, one of the questions that you should be asking is, would you use it if it had the vulnerabilities that your application has? And that's when you know security is a feature, because it's not something that people were asking you for, but it was something that you and the people using your applications are expecting. In a lot of ways, I like to say this is kind of like the faucet that you go to or the sink that you may go to. And when you turn that left knob, you expect the water to be hot. That's universally true. You didn't have to ask anyone for it, and you didn't have to tell the plumber to install it that way. It's just the way that that operates. And so in a lot of ways, that's the way that people think of security today, is it's one of those utilities that you just expect it to be there and expect it to work as intended. There are benefits to treating security as a feature. A good example of that is attack complexity increases. One of the things that I like to think about here is, why are phishing attacks still so prevalent? Because people fall for them, first of all, and because the more complex attacks are really expensive. We can look at the zero-day market when it comes to things like iOS or Android vulnerabilities that are out there today, where you've had 0 days to apply a patch or implement security. And quite frankly, those costs are going up. And that's a good thing, because what that ends up meaning is that the attacker ends up being a very small subset of the world's landscape. It ends up being state actors as opposed to cheeky kids on the internet, for an example. And so that way your application will be a little bit more robust, and quite frankly, you're outrunning a majority of the bears. Of course, it also differentiates your project or your product. If you think about Apple, for example, they're almost universally known for a lot of the security and privacy implementations that they've put in place. We can also look at examples within the software development landscape, such as React versus AngularJS. Back in the day, AngularJS, the original version of it, had a sandbox, and that sandbox had a lot of escapes, and it led to a lot of vulnerabilities, such as remote code execution or even full remote reverse shell. I've taught a couple trainings that have shown exactly how this works, and thankfully, Google has addressed that with later versions of Angular, such as by removing the sandbox in the original AngularJS because people were using it wrong. And in this way, if we think of security as a feature from the get-go, we can actually write on secure frameworks and languages like Rust to eliminate a vast majority of the vulnerabilities that enter our landscape. And of course, once you go ahead and invest in security as a feature, it allows you to save time and money. It's that return on investment, that compounding interest, that allows you to actually go ahead and focus on other investments and experimentation so that you can grab more market share and, of course, differentiate your product and then pay down those other technical debts that you might be encountering. And then, of course, in terms of some tools that you can use, I like to say with static analysis, GitHub's advanced security toolset is phenomenal. Their acquisition of Semel is light years ahead of other products in the space. And I say that from being a code security engineer at Veracode in a past life. It is one of those tools that can really make a difference in your code base, and I strongly encourage any open source project to check that out. Dependency checking, again, making sure that you check the ingredients as well as of the static analysis recipe. Dependabot, really great tool if you're on the GitHub platform, which I would think that you probably are if you're watching this. And then, of course, OWASP's dependency check tool, if you need another thing to go ahead and look into the environment and make sure that things are working appropriately and that the libraries you're using are fresh and secure.
Ну что ж, вы согласны с Китом, что безопасность вашего кода на самом деле тоже является фичей? Я с ним однозначно согласна. На самом деле, со стратегической точки зрения, чем раньше вы будете заботиться о безопасности вашего кода, тем больше денег и времени вы сэкономите потом. И безопасный продукт – это все-таки более выдающийся продукт. Но теперь мы перейдем к другой теме, хотя она не настолько отдаляется от security. И Кит... извините. Да, и Кит упомянул устранение технического долга. Скоро вы узнаете об этом поподробнее. А пока посмотрим еще одну сессию, посвященную безопасности. Джастин Хатчингс, главный менеджер по продукту в GitHub, говорил на Universe о функции GitHub Advanced Security. Он начал с обзора текущего состояния безопасности программного обеспечения, а потом показал, как функция GitHub Advanced Security помогает защитить кодовые зависимости, код и конфиденциальную информацию. Let's watch Justin Hutchings.
Here at GitHub, we're really focused on understanding security from the developer's point of view, because empowering developers to build secure code is one of the best ways to move the needle on your security story. Now, there's a ton of great data in the State of the Octoverse report this year, but one of the things that I like to point out is how developers introduce security vulnerabilities at a relatively constant rate with every line of code that's written. And that's not me criticizing developers. I don't write the code, and I know just how hard it is. This should really underscore that writing secure software is really hard. It doesn't matter how smart your team is. It doesn't matter, how well you hire. There's a reason that MITRE has so many different CWE buckets. It's because as humans, we tend to introduce the same kinds of problems over and over again. Around 83% of applications have at least one security vulnerability in them. Organizations that adopt DevSecOps practices run security scans daily reduce their mean time to remediate security problems by around 72% versus organizations that run, just a few times a year. So that's why we at GitHub have been hard at work with a collection of security solutions that we call GitHub Advanced Security. Within GitHub Advanced Security, we've got three major product areas. The first is secure dependencies. And this is your classic software composition analysis, or SCA capabilities. They help you track the software you depend on for vulnerabilities. Considering that, as much as 90% of the code on GitHub depends on open source, vulnerabilities in your supply chain are more important than ever. The next area is secure code. And this is our set of features that handle static analysis security testing, or SAST. While SCA looks for vulnerabilities in code you depend on, SAST looks for vulnerabilities in code you wrote by analyzing that code and finding bad patterns and data flows. Finally, secure secrets. We know credential leaks are a huge problem, both for security and reliability reasons. I mean, have you ever tried to roll keys on an app where someone hard-coded credentials into the source code instead of putting them into the key vault? It's not going to be a good day. You're going to cause an outage, and everyone's going to be unhappy. So let's drill in. Dependency review is a brand new capability that we unveiled here today. You might have seen Nat speak about it earlier. This helps give code reviewers insights about the dependencies in your pull requests. That's why we've made it really easy to view results in code scanning. Super easy by integrating those alerts into pull requests and making sure that developers are only blocked when they introduce a net new vulnerability in their code. That way, when you have a lot of security debt, it's not going to come up every day. It's not going to slow you down. It's still there, and we hope you'll fix it, but it's not in your way. CodeQL is the semantic analysis engine that powers our own security analysis. Now, a lot of static analysis tools out there do things like use regular expressions or look at bytecode to try and figure out what's happening. CodeQL, we actually map all the code in your repository into a graph database. And this is special because it allows security researchers to reason over that code and develop queries that can find really complicated vulnerabilities with really high precision. By bringing all of this together in one user experience, we're making it easier than ever to get security challenges in front of developers before they're a problem for your users. And we're using that exact same infrastructure to help enterprise developers identify secrets in their private code as well. This scans the full history of your repositories, and it provides users with a native experience for triaging secrets that we find in your code. Now, as much as this is a security feature, it's also a reliability feature. We're working with everyone from big clouds like AWS, Azure, or Google, through developer tools like NPM, Twilio, HashiCorp, or Pulumi. This list is growing all the time as more and more companies work to help their users avoid security risks in the cloud.
Итак, давайте подумаем о безопасности с точки зрения разработчика. Как мы защищаем наши зависимости, то есть supply chain, сам наш код и конфиденциальную информацию. Один из показанных Джастином инструментов – это дебатный бот, который анализирует зависимости в нашем проекте на предмет известных уязвимостей. Мне лично нравится, как мощь и постоянно растущая экосистема CodeQL позволяет заменить собой множество сторонних статистических анализаторов кода. Вообще невероятно, что там происходит. Хорошо подумать также о том, что на Universe 2020 было множество крутейших сессий, посвященных безопасности, и это намного больше, чем мы можем охватить в рамках нашего сегодняшнего обзора. Но помните, что вы можете посмотреть все сессии целиком на сайте githubuniverse.com. Оставим пока вопросы безопасности и поговорим немного о самом GitHub. Недавно мы опубликовали отчеты состояния актовселенной 2020. Это наше ежегодное исследование о том, что происходит в GitHub и в сообществе разработчиков open source. Мы очень воодушевились следующими из отчета тенденциями и готовы поделиться своими мыслями. Посмотрите выдержки из выступления Николь Форскен из нашей команды. Она рассмотрела глобальные паттерны разработки и объяснила, как такие фичи, как Discussions, Actions, Dependable помогают компаниям масштабировать свою работу и сделать ее более эффективной. Let's see that.
We just released the State of Octaverse report last week. It was a birthday present to myself and everyone else. We took a slightly different approach this year. So in addition to sharing with the world how GitHub has grown and changed, we also did some deep dives. We had quite a year. We have now grown to over 56 million total developers on GitHub. That's some power. When we say community, we say community. Now, we also see 72% of Fortune 50 companies are using GitHub Enterprise. Just in the last year, in the last 12 months, we see over 60 million repositories were created and 1.9 billion, with a B, contributions were added in the last year. Overall, and we see this fairly consistently across the time zones, many people are both working longer hours and getting more done. We saw contributions to open source jump initially 40% compared to last year. And then when they settle out at about 25% increase compared to the previous year. We found that once an open source repo starts using actions on their pull requests, we see an 18% faster time to merge that pull request and an increase of 30% more pull requests merged. GitHub released and announced Discussions earlier this year. So we took a look at the next.js repository and how they were using Discussions. And it was great to see and kind of exciting to see how this grew over time. And what we found is that it really helped keep this community more resilient and more sustainable. What some of our other analysis found is that some of the best ways to invite and encourage and foster newcomers to stick with the community are with issues. The challenge with issues is that can burn out maintainers. So the exciting thing is that we also found that one of the best ways to encourage newcomers is with discussions. Discussions is a way to engage, talk about what's happening, learn new norms. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, what does this have to do with me, Nicole? This is the enterprise track. This is great because as we think about scaling our solutions and scaling throughout our enterprises, think about things like centers of excellence or communities of practice. This helps make sure that our expertise isn't siloed. This helps us spread that excellence. It's a lot like inner source, right? We have so many things. We have expertise, we have process. There's so many things that we can share. we found that any piece of code or any repo has a 59% chance of getting a security alert in the next year for those active repositories with supported package ecosystems. Most vulnerabilities are mistakes. Only 17% of them are explicitly malicious, things like backdoor attacks, and they result in only 0.2% of alerts in the very commonly and most used repos and most used files. 83% of these vulnerabilities are the result of mistakes. So it's important to remember anyone can make a mistake, and anyone can insert a mistake into your code base. So by leveraging the power of community, that means that anyone in this community can help find these vulnerabilities and fix them for you. Another benefit of automation: repositories that automatically generated a pull request using Dependabot to fix, patch their software 1.4 times faster. So many times people ask me, what does shift left look like? If I want to be doing DevSecOps, what does that look like? This is what that looks like. We can scale what it is that we find. We can build that into our development workflow.
Фантастика! Как за последний год GitHub вырос. Очень тяжело поверить, но зато очень радует тоже, значит, у нас отличный продукт. Мы увидели, что на GitHub теперь есть более чем 56 миллионов разработчиков. И они вот за последний год открыли 60 миллионов новых репозиториев. Это просто как бы не поверить. И за этот год сделали почти 2 миллиарда новых вкладов в код. Слияние PR с помощью Actions происходит на 18% быстрее. И, конечно же, вы уже несколько раз слышали про фичер Dependabot, который помогает вам ускорить слияние PR и повышает security вашего кода. Но теперь мы перейдем к теме, которые упомянули несколько раз до сих пор, в том числе GitHub, и расскажем о техническом долге. Технический долг нужно не только избегать, но и уметь устранять. И для предприятия это огромная задача. GitHub – это тоже предприятие, и мы тоже не застрахованы от технического долга. Думая об этом тезисе, давайте обратимся к тактике. Следующие выдержки взяты из сессии, посвященной тому, как GitHub устраняет собственный технический долг и как мы не допускаем отставания по срокам. Кит Беллинджер, Киртана Кумар и Лиз Селлинг подробно показали нам, как эти проблемы решаются в 3 рабочих потоках: внешний цикл, внутренний цикл и надежность. Let's go to the video.
So at GitHub this summer, we basically decided to have a project where we were going to pay down this technical debt with very specific outcomes in mind. We stopped most, not all, feature development to really focus the engineering team on swarming on these issues. We went out to ICs to understand what are the problems that they are seeing. And of course, we looked at, what are the problems we're seeing kind of holistically across the entire system. And out of that, we came up with 3 major objectives or work streams for how we wanted to organize this effort. One was around both the outer loop, how you deploy software, but also our observability, both observability during a deploy and then just generally speaking. Another big set of work streams was around the inner loop and testing. That is, when someone is coding, they're making a build locally, they're running tests, all of those kinds of things. And then the final loop was, final work stream was specifically around reliability. What parts of the system do we need to make better and stronger so that the site is always up, always serving our customers in all cases? And so we organized across those. We had objective leads who kind of looked at each one of these 3. And then underneath them, we created virtual teams of work stream leads to tackle very specific problems.
Ultimately, we selected these as some of the work streams that the projects that we were going to work on. First, we wanted to look at how we could speed up our artifact builds. And we need some more progressive rollout stages and automation around them. And we noticed that there were recurring themes of deployment problems that we could eliminate that could take care of that need for manual intervention. So we aimed to increase that deployment success rate. And we also wanted to add some resilience in our deployment process to github.com outages so that we could use github.com more in our deployment process so that we could restore service faster when there is, in fact, an event. Fast forward a couple of months, and here's what we were able to accomplish. First, we added several reliability features, and thankfully we were able to do this without adding friction, right? We were able to maintain that critical queue to deploy time that we watch because we shaved time off elsewhere. We've seen our deployment frequency bump up. We're often delivering over 100 pull requests a day to github.com now. The number of deployment rollbacks we have to do are fewer and fewer. It saves so many hours of deployment interruptions each week. This past month alone, it was down another 15%. The time to resolve incidents when they do happen is vastly improved. And I want to mention a thing that I was super excited to see happen here. We set up a mirror of our GitHub repository so that we can build and deploy GitHub still when GitHub isn't available, the thing that we do it when it is. And another one I'm super excited about is that we're enabling merge queues for more of our repositories. We've separated out how we bundle up our pull requests, and that's separate out of the deployment process now for that repository. So all of this, along with some simpler confidence dashboards, again, that progressive rollout automation, and really, I believe, just involving so many more people to work on this experience and the outer loop and the observability, it led to this great improvement in our development happiness measurement that we take each quarter. 160%, y'all, like that's big. And I don't want to neglect to call out another key observation related to this, and that is the increased unity across the engineering organizations, right? So many teams had opportunities to work together on things that we wouldn't ever get a chance to collaborate on normally. And the results of that have been so positive. But really, how do we keep this up? That's what's really important. So we have now what I like to call anti-slip measures in place. Formally here, we call it our fundamentals program. But for every improvement that we make, we set new benchmarks, we raise that bar, we monitor them each week to understand, does something need to be nudged a bit? Right, we have that additional visibility to make it a lot easier to have these conversations with product managers and engineering leaders. And it makes planning able to factor this in better and at least be more aware of what we're going to set aside if we're choosing to do other things, right? And we continue partnering and working with other teams who would really like to contribute. And this is helping us work smarter and be more effective and really get that high performing thing without having to work longer hours.
We leveraged our products, issues, actions, workflow integrations. We focused on the key metrics to identify bottlenecks and found a maintainable and a reusable solution. We ultimately built an internal tool that supports our developers and at the same time acts as a guardrail for product quality. And as for numbers, we reduced our CI time to 13 minutes, making our CI workflow 3 times faster. And then as an added bonus, we reduced our compute costs down by a 4th. This was improvement done just in one of the work streams. In the larger initiative, there was a lot more improvement, as Liz talked about. But we focused on the fundamentals of development, tracking down important metrics: deploy frequency, change failure rate, time to restore a service, and of course, what I fixed, lead time to change. Above and beyond numbers, GitHub engineering worked together to identify, prioritize, plan, swarm on the most impactful issues that matter to us. We brought together teams from different parts of the organization to work on the fundamentals. And what warms my heart the most is how we were able to focus on our engineering platform, cracking down technical debt, making engineering improvements so that we could continue to build the best-in-class developer products for you.
Итак, это был классный пример того, как мы сфокусировали усилия на устранении технического долга, потом сопроводили этот процесс необходимыми метриками и в итоге стали свидетелями положительных результатов наших усилий. Например, время устранения инцидентов сократилось на 25%. Это мы точно знаем, потому что у нас есть метрики. При этом скорость непрерывной интеграции повысилась в 3 раза. И мы теперь тратим меньше циклов CPU наших машин CI. И, конечно же, то, что на 160% вырос показатель NSAT разработчиков, а это Net Satisfaction, то есть удовольствие нета. Это очень круто. То есть я не знаю точно, как измеряли NSAT наших разработчиков, но я за них очень рад. Мы приближаемся к концу нашей программы обзора лучших моментов Universe 2020. Сегодня мы узнали много нового. Мы увидели выступления о новых фичах продукта, о безопасности и о самом GitHub. Мы закончим этот стриминг презентациями 3 компаний, представители которых один за другим расскажут об использовании GitHub для решения уникальных задач. Итак, сначала мы посмотрим выдержки из выступления Лизы Карпио и Росио Монтес из Intuit. Их компания использовала Inner Source для реорганизации устаревших методов. Затем вы увидите Энджи Браун и Тони Маккали из The Home Depot. Они объяснили, как открытый исходный код дает им гибкость в процессе непрерывного улучшения внутри их организации. И, наконец, слово возьмет Хун Тон Браун, главный разработчик архитектуры ПО и управляющий исследовательской лабораторией в 3M. Он поделится с аудиторией опытом 3M в ускорении внедрения новых технологий с помощью Github Actions. Let's see those sessions.
I'm Principal Tech Evangelist at Intuit, focused on tech culture. And I'm joined by my colleague.
Rocío Montes, staff software engineer, leader in inner source and open source. I create tooling and automation to make these 2 initiatives successful.
At Intuit, we have 6 big groups across multiple continents and multiple time zones. Engineers and other technologists focus on delivering solutions declared as priorities by their groups. We have aggressive schedules to deliver features, fixes, and products to millions of customers. And speed, yes, it's a necessity. But man, to get there, there are some challenges. We solved it by taking inspiration from open source.
We implemented a solution that included an inner source model. Inner source takes the principles of open source into the enterprise environment. Inner source is a great tool to help break silos, encourage internal collaboration, accelerate new engineering onboarding, and identify opportunities to even contribute back to open source. You will for sure need leader support in order to provide, time for training of their engineers, time for their engineers to adopt engineer guidelines and make the technology changes. And like I mentioned before, you need to create a set of unified guidelines. Also, identify your model teams, these teams that are going to be, like I mentioned, foundational capabilities in each of the business units that you have. Conduct workshops to teach how to do inner source. We actually had workshops at each Intuit site, and every chance we got, every conference, every event, there we were, inner source, rah, rah, rah. So it's really important that you teach what inner source is.
Now, you heard about the benefits at a high level for engineers. We also wanted to let you know that many engineers told us that by allowing engineers to contribute to other repos, they were actually investing in their craft and that they were learning new skills. And in addition to the engineers, there were other stakeholders that really do benefit. The other one is our internal and external customers. And our customers definitely said that, wow, the products, not only are they delightful, but when there's a problem, you get that fix out right away. Now, for the business, Rocio did mention the business earlier. For the business, not only was there speed in delivering solutions and products to customers, but there was definitely higher engagement from our engineers or from product development teams. And we believe that and we're starting to see, some data on this, but we believe that higher engagement leads to higher retention of top tech talent.
My name is Angie Brown, and I am a vice president of information technology at the Home Depot. I currently have responsibility for our merchandising organization.
My name is Tony McCulley. I've been at the Home Depot for over 7 years now. I've been in the industry 20 years, which sounds crazy to me to say that now.
Our journey probably started back in 2014 on that front, which is really when we started what internally we call our agility transformation. And that's when we kicked off really changing how we build software, going from large projects with a large number of people and a large timeline to smaller balanced teams, leveraging test-driven development, leveraging continuous deployment, just a variety of different things changed in our work practices as we were moving down that agile journey.
We just started spending more time trying to understand treat them as users and understand their challenges, start advocating on their behalf, and then trying to provide them solutions that sort of meet their growing needs and kind of meet them where they are. So this meant approaching platforms and infrastructure and tooling with sort of the same user-centric or product-based approach mindset that we do everything else. So like our frontline associates and our customer-facing experiences. So we needed tooling that meant empowering the engineers, supporting self-organization, and tooling that helped foster more collaboration and communication. Whenever you're talking about this agile journey or this transformation, I think one of the most important things is fostering this culture of continuous learning and improvement. And when you're talking about continuous improvement, it's very difficult to do that sometimes if you don't know where you came from or where you started or where you are. And so I think, figuring out what to measure and what to improve is really important. So that's been difficult in IT. I mean, I think, almost forever, but I think it's changed a lot in the last few years. And a lot of that has to do with the work that, Nicole Forsgren and Gene Kim and the others have done over the years with the DevOps Handbook and Accelerate. So the 4 key metrics that we learned about in Accelerate has been a really liberating thing for me in my space. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we used to do that, felt good or felt like the right thing to do. I mean, for the first time in a long time, like it's quantifiable, it's tangible, and it's measurable. And that's really liberating. I mean, for now, like it's allowed us to treat our platforms and infrastructure and service offerings much more like a product. So we can experiment, we can make hypotheses, we can try things, and we can figure out what has a positive or a negative impact.
My name is Hung Brownson, and I'm the Chief Architect and Lab Manager at our 3M's Corporate Research and Development Group. I'd like to share with you our journey today from scientific poster sessions to GitHub Global Actions, how we've accelerated our digital innovations. By extending GitHub into Model Hub platform and using Booster as that interface with GitHub, we have drastically shortened the time it took for our modelers to onboard new models. From weeks to days. We've also tripled the number of models since launching Booster with GitHub this spring. The results have been fabulous. We've accelerated our modeling platform usage, and more importantly, we accelerated our research. GitHub has helped 3M transform in a number of different ways. By automating our 3-person folklore. We still do poster sessions today, but we've also complemented that with a GitHub ecosystem and a collaboration vehicle. We've enabled instantaneous collaboration where we couldn't do that with poster sessions. We've helped establish a culture of code reuse, which was our original objective, by the way, as we embarked on building these digital platforms. We've also helped to protect IP while accelerating our R&D innovations globally. And we've helped really to improve the way we work. And most importantly, we've brought us closer together across this diverse community of scientists and engineers. And because of this, we've accelerated our R&D and digital innovation. This is really important, and this has been an exciting part of our journey.
Так интересно узнавать о том, как наши клиенты пользуются нашим продуктом. А в этом случае мне даже еще более интересно, потому что, оказывается, я клиент всех этих 3 компаний. И прям вот в последние выходные я покупала что-то в Home Depot. Тяжело поверить, но мы совершили полный круг от выступления Нета до обзора последней сессии. На этом наш обзор лучших моментов Universe 2020 года подходит к концу. Мы сегодня увидели столько интересного, и это только основные моменты. Представляйте себе, сколько еще материала остается за кадром. Мы узнали о новых функциях и о том, как они работают для корпоративных клиентов. Мы много услышали о безопасности и о собственных процессах внутри GitHub. Наконец, мы увидели, как некоторые из наших любимых корпоративных клиентов пользуются GitHub. И я надеюсь, что вы получили от этого просмотра столько же удовольствия, сколько и мы. Напоминаем, что Все, что вы сегодня увидели, также доступно для просмотра в любое время, которое вам удобно. Для того, чтобы это увидеть, просто зайдите на githubuniverse.com и нажмите на раздел «Дополнительное» в меню. Если у вас есть какие-либо мысли или впечатления о просмотренных материалах, пожалуйста, свяжитесь с нами по Твиттеру на @github. И, наконец, следите за новостями о Universe 2021 года. Итак, формально мы закончили с презентацией.
Спасибо, что смотрели нас. Теперь мы можем перейти в общий звонок Teams и ответить на некоторые ваши вопросы. Ссылка на Teams должна появиться после окончания стриминга, а также мы ее запостим сейчас в чат на YouTube. До связи.